go the holier than thous.
That's right.
Steps up and delivers a 50-50 ball. What a catch by Olave.
Rescue reports that he is on his way to the Milwaukee Bucks.
He's not getting his happy ending this time.
Okay, Thursday, January 11th. Justin, just me and you today. Zach could not make it. A lot to get into, though. We'll get into it right away. Saban retiring. Found out last night. Got a lot of other head coaching jobs in the NFL also having vacancies right now. But we're going to start with Saban. Saban did announce he is retiring with Alabama, the Roll Tide. What were your overall thoughts on this, Justin, when you first heard about this? I mean, breaking news, of course. No one really thought this was coming. You kind of wonder if he would have stayed if Alabama had a better season than it did last year. Well, better being that they made it to the national championship. But just what was your overall thoughts on this? Were you surprised when you heard this? Or, did you think he was going to stay longer? Did you want him to stay longer? Like, what was your overall thoughts on when you heard this?
I'm surprised. I think it's weird that he retired even. And that with Bama, he was 3 wins away from getting his 300th win. I think he could have stayed one more year for that, maybe even go out with a national championship, but maybe he would have retired anyway if they won the national championship, beat Michigan, and then obviously beat Washington. So I could see Saban possibly being an analysis, possibly being a game film analysis. I think this is going to be interesting to see where he goes, but I don't think he's going to the NFL and certainly not coaching college football.
Yeah, he doesn't strike me as somebody that would be good behind a booth, like would be good in broadcasting. He seems very dry to me. Doesn't really seem energetic, but I'm sure he knows his stuff. Like you said, Justin, he's going to be a good analyst for sure. He's going to be able to break down film better than probably anyone else. And, whether it be ESPN, Fox, CBS, we'll see where he goes. I think it's the transfer portal, personally. I think it's the transfer portal, the NIL. I mean, college sports right now, we've been talking about it at length on this show over and over, is an absolute circus right now. It's getting out of hand, and I think that might have done him in. He just doesn't want to deal with it anymore. You have head coaches on every podcast, every news articles that you read. I mean, they're so tired of the transfer portal, and this NIL money has gotten out of hand as well, and it's just an absolute crazy scene in college sports right now, both in football and basketball. And for me, I think that's what ultimately did him in. It's just not like it was when he first started. That's for sure. NFL, speaking of vacancies, speaking of people parting ways and even just getting fired, a lot of news in the NFL this week, Justin. A very, very extended Black Monday, that's for sure. We'll start with Arthur Smith. I mean, of course, Bill Belichick, we just found out last night, he's parting ways. Ron Rivera, Mike Vrabel, Arthur Smith, Pete Carroll is not going to be a head coach anymore. But we'll start with Arthur Smith. Of course, he is going to be gone with the Falcons now. Nothing went right for the Falcons during Smith's tenure. He never had a span where he won 2 games in a row. Had multiple 3-loss streaks as well as the Falcons coach. Didn't utilize his offensive weapons enough, especially this year with his rookies in Bijan, Pitts, and London. I mean, what were your overall thoughts on Arthur Smith? He had to go. I think it was a good call. I think if there was one name in Black Monday that people were pretty confident was going to leave, it was Arthur Smith, and it did end up happening. What were your overall thoughts, Justin, on this?
Well, it was a good move by the Falcons. Maybe a little bit too soon, but Arthur Smith definitely underachieved in Atlanta, not winning the division. He doesn't have a quarterback, obviously. I think the Falcons have a pretty semi-talented roster. They're in a pretty weak division, obviously. They could have had Deshaun Watson a couple years ago, but instead when he went to the Cleveland Browns. But I think that the Falcons made the right move here, and obviously there's a lot of big name coaches out there. You never know who they could end up with in Atlanta. And Arthur Blank has got a lot of searching to do on his hands for a next head coach.
Yeah, like I said, didn't utilize his offensive talents all year. We've been saying it at length on this show over and over. I mean, the rookie Bijan Robinson didn't utilize. I mean, even veteran talent like Pitts, London, he didn't utilize them either. And he kept Desmond Ritter in way too long. I don't know why Desmond Ritter played as long as he did all season. I don't know why he started as much games as he did all season. That I think was ultimately his undoing. And both Atlanta fans for sure did not want to see Desmond Ritter play anymore, and even national fans were just wanted him off our screens on Sunday. So for him to keep him in that long, that was definitely his undoing for sure. A lot of head coaching jobs, like you said, a lot of head coaches available now in the NFL. I've been hearing a lot of buzz about potentially Ben Johnson, the
Mm-hmm.
offensive coordinator for Detroit Lions. I think that makes a lot of sense. A lot of his playmakers on Atlanta are very similar to the Lions, so that might be a name that comes out as a replacement for Arthur Smith in Atlanta. Maybe Ben Johnson from Detroit. Obviously, not going to happen anytime soon. Detroit is getting ready for their playoff games coming up here. Mike Vrabel. Mike Vrabel is also out. I was not surprised about this. I think it's a firing. I still think it was more of a mutual parting of ways. I know it was labeled as a firing. Mike Vrabel, way too talented. Tennessee, Nashville, they knew this, and I think it really was more of a mutual parting, kind of giving Mike Vrabel what he wants, respecting what he wants, and realizing that his talent as a head coach was absolutely being squandered in Nashville. What were your overall thoughts about Vrabel, Justin?
Well, I think the Titans really wanted a new voice of the room, and Vrabel. It was a mistake to fire him. I know Titans fans are very, very upset with the firing of Vrabel, but I think Vrabel definitely could get one of these jobs coming up. Even who knows? Even teams in the playoffs could move on from their head coach if they lose in the first round. Never
Yeah,
know.
of of course. He led the Tennessee to 4 consecutive winning seasons after he arrived there in 2018. But of course, his last 2 back-to-back seasons, finishing multiple games under 500. Not much of a litmus test. I mean, it's only been 2 years, and of course, he's still a really good coach. And like you said, Justin, I think that's why a lot of people in Tennessee were thrown off by this news. People weren't thrown off, though, by Ron Rivera. I mentioned Arthur Smith being one of those names we were pretty confident was going to be gone on Monday. Uh, Ron Rivera was another one of those names. Obviously, just absolutely abysmal. Finished this season 4-13. His time with the Commanders, he went 26 for 40 and with one tie as well in his 4 seasons at the helm. Obviously, this new GM, this new Harris ownership group, they want to do things differently. I'm surprised they even waited all season to do this, but of course, this was no surprise. A lot of people saw this coming, and yeah, they will be in search for a new coach as well. Anything else you want to really say about Ron Rivera before moving on?
It's interesting how the Commanders and Josh Harris and the new ownership group is bringing in a NBA GM, former NBA executive.
Yep,
Who is it? Bob Myers. Yeah, Bob Myers
yep,
from the Golden State Warriors, and Rick Spielman, another former NFL executive with the Vikings, to search for their new GM and possibly their new head coach. So I think Washington's doing things a little differently, but it's very intriguing actually how they're bringing in these guys to search for a new GM and coach, and
yep,
obviously maybe even Bill Belichick. You never know. Especially, we'll get to him in a minute.
yeah. Pete Carroll, before we get to
Mm-hmm.
Belichick, that was surprising. Not leaving the team, not fired or anything. You just, I guess you can call it a demotion if you want to call it that. He's still going to be on the team, still going to be helping out with the team, of course, but just will no longer be the head coach.
More of a
Weird
front
though. My only
office
takeaway,
position.
yeah, yeah. I mean, anything you want to say about this, Justin? Weird, really, because this came 2 days after Carroll basically went on a press conference and said that he intended to return as the coach for next season. So a little bit weird. I mean, what were your thoughts on this when you heard about it?
It's definitely weird. I mean, I thought Pete Carroll was going to come back for another season, and I think that Pete Carroll is going to have a big role with the Seahawks still as an advisor in the front office. So
Yeah,
maybe he could be part of their next head coaching search. And I think we should go over how intriguing these jobs are as well.
very.
That's
Yeah,
open.
yeah. We'll do that on Saturday. We'll go over.
Hmm.
We'll kind of rank the intrigue of these head coaching positions. We're just kind of breaking them down right now. I mean, we can do it right now too,
Hmm.
Justin. I mean, what would you think would be the most intriguing uh, vacancy right now? I mean, I definitely think the Patriots would be intriguing just because, just the ownership group that they have there. Of course, they're on the downcline right now. They don't really have a lot of talent. They don't really have a quarterback, but they're going to be drafting high for sure. It might even be in the Caleb Williams Bowl if they can, if the Bears want to trade that, and the Patriots might be interested in that because they definitely need a quarterback. How about you? Like, what would be a intriguing vacancy for you?
The Falcons vacancy, I think that's intriguing, but the Chargers with their roster and
Yeah.
Justin Herbert, I think that's going to be a very big vacancy. Maybe even the Raiders, if they officially decide to move on from Antonio Pierce, that could be a big vacancy. The Patriots, obviously, I know their roster's not great right now, but a very successful franchise since Bob Kraft has owned the team, obviously in New England. So I could see, I could see maybe even Vrabel going to New England. I could even see a
Hmm.
big name coach in New England, maybe even a Harbaugh if he decides to leave Michigan after the national championship victory.
I think I do think Hardball's going to leave. But yeah, I mean, it's crazy. I don't remember the last time there's been this many firings. Well, not so much firings, but just throughout
Big
the
name
year, this
firings
many
too.
vacancies. Yeah, that's the thing. It's been a lot of big names, people leaving, retiring, moving on, parting ways, whatever you want to call it. That's been the thing. It's been a lot of big names. We've had a lot of seasons, of course. Black Monday. We've had a lot of Black Mondays, but this one was particularly more black because just of the names themselves, not really the amount of people, but just the quality of people, how big the names were that ultimately ended up leaving the head coaching positions. Let's move on to complaintives, Justin. Doing a little bit differently this week. What is your complaintive of the week?
My complainant of the week is the Cutter Gather drama. If you ever
Yeah, you got it. Yep.
say his name right with the Flyers. Another Philadelphia athlete or another athlete in Philadelphia that did not want to play in the city. He's up there now with Ben Simmons. He's up there now with Carson Wentz. He's up there now with certain other athletes that have played in Philadelphia. But yeah, another
Yep.
drama.
Well, it's the fan base too volatile of a fan base. I think Flyers handled the situation amazingly, though. I mean, they basically got rid of him while his draft capital was the highest it was, and they got some good return back for him. I don't know the exact nature of the deal of the trade that they made, but yeah, I mean, basically, I think he just won the world championships, and he had the highest draft value, or just had the highest value possible at that time. And Flyers, the front office, they heard this news. Kudos to them. Got rid of him while he was still high, and
Mm-hmm.
hey, they got some good return out of him.
Tortorella probably
Michael,
played a role in it too. I mean, not a lot of
yeah,
guys like Tortorella playing with John Tortorella as their coach, but
yeah,
they're a young team right now, and with the Flyers, and things are they have basically a new front office, if you can say, with Keith Jones as the president and Danny Briere as the general manager.
yeah. I mean, how about the Flyers? I mean, they came down to earth a little bit recently, but they've been
Mm-hmm.
blowing expectations this year. They were expected to be one of the worst teams in the league, and they're in the top half of the league as far as points values go. It's been pretty remarkable what the team's been able to do, just in general. I mean, like I said, no one had any expectations for this team going into this year, and they've been really impressing people. My complaintive, the announcement of the Super Bowl venues for the next 4 Super Bowls came out, and there was a massive lack of parity. The NFL announced this season's Super Bowl, of course, will be in Las Vegas, but then the next Super Bowl will be at the Caesars Superdome in New Orleans, and then it will be in Levi's Stadium the year after that. But then in 4 years from now, it actually will return to Santa. It will. No, I'm sorry.
To Los
3 years
Angeles,
from now,
right?
yeah, no, it's going to return to. Let me repeat that. So this year, obviously Las Vegas. Next year, New Orleans. But then 3 years from now, it actually will return to Santa Clara, and there's just a lot of yeah, there's just a lot of parity. There's not, we have to make it so all these teams, all these cities can get these good hosting venues. It makes a lot of money for the cities. It brings a lot of culture out, and I don't like really seeing the lack of parity. The league did have a bid process for Super Bowls. They didn't used to do that. Back in 2017, cities and teams were able to actually bid for the Super Bowl. Now it's a host committee in conjunction with teams and owners of the stadium. So a little bit different of a process they do it now. I don't really like it. Like I said, I want more parity in the Super Bowl locations, and we're really just not getting that anymore. Make Maker of the week. Justin, what is your maker of the
My
week?
maker of the week, I'm going to go with Mike Vrabel. Going to be able to coach a better team than he did in Tennessee. I think there's going to be some intriguing jobs open with the Chargers. Obviously, we mentioned the Patriots. He is a former Patriot under Bill Belichick. Obviously, he played linebacker for them in the early 2000s. So Vrabel could be an interesting candidate in New England. Then you have the Raiders. That's always an interesting franchise. Not the best run franchise, obviously, right now,
Mm-hmm.
but the Raiders, the Falcons, a lot of interesting jobs. Maybe even Washington with their new ownership, and obviously maybe even a team in the playoffs that loses
Yeah.
in the first round. Could be Philadelphia, even Dallas, maybe Tampa Bay. Could be a team that loses in the first round that might want to move on from their head coach. So Mike Vrabel is my maker of the week.
My maker of the week is going to be Minnesota basketball. Um, Playing really well this year, despite struggling last year. Last year they went 2-17 in Big Ten games. This year alone, already at 3-1 in Big Ten play, already beating their win total from last year. Junior guard coming up, Darcin Garcia, excuse me. He's playing absolutely amazing. He's averaging 16.7 points a game, 7.5 rebounds, and over 2 assists per game as well. He's been absolutely crushing it. Golden Gophers, man, they're on an upcline in college basketball, beating out teams in the Big Ten like Nebraska, Maryland, and Michigan. So it's they got a matchup coming up Friday night against Indiana away. This is going to be a true litmus test for the team. Indiana, of course, being one of the best teams in the country. If Minnesota, if they can at least go in there, get a win, of course, would be amazing. But even keep this game close, I think a lot of people should be talking about Minnesota basketball more as an up and coming team that has really gotten things together from last year. Justin, what's your faker of the week?
My faker of the week. I'm going to go with Washington's defense against the run. Michigan could not, they could not stop Michigan's running attack, and they have a great running attack over in Michigan. But Washington's defense and offense actually did not play well in the national title game, and a dominant win for Michigan.
Yeah. My faker, yet again, the Pistons. They were up by the Kings recently by 20 going into halftime. Well, not halftime, actually. They jumped off to a 20-point first half lead. Uh, Jalen Duren and Bojan Bojanovic combined to score 23 of the Pistons' first 27 points, and they went up 27-15 through the first 5 minutes of action. They continued to push the pace, and they were they went up 47-29, and this 47 first quarter points tied the second most scored in any one quarter by any team in the NBA history. Then they led by 54-36, but then went absolutely cold. The Kings would go on runs to take a 66-65 lead with just over a minute remaining in the half. They would never get it back, getting outscored 63-45 in the second half and ultimately ending the game 131-110. Absolutely just brutal. I mean, Pistons were playing really the best quarter of any team in the NBA season. And of course, they reverted back to being the Pistons in the second half and just got absolutely blown away by the Kings. That's my faker. Pistons get a lead, but couldn't hold on to it. Just an absolute just joke right now of a team. Just can't play together, can't figure things out, and even a 20-point lead they can't hold on to. All right, moving on. Interview Cole Parke from Kentucky Kernel. Gonna break down Kentucky football from last year. Overall, their season, how fans thought about the season, good season, bad season, all of that. And of course, get into the basketball season. Awesome interview with him. Why is this team maybe one of the best teams Kentucky has seen this decade? but offensively, defensively, break it down all with him. The expectations for this team going into March, and anything else we get into on that interview. So without further ado, let's head to the Midwest and talk to Cole Parke in Kentucky. Okay, we are on Kentucky's campus this week, talking to Cole Parke, the sports editor for the Kentucky Kernel. It's a student-run newspaper, the Kentucky Kernel, right? Cool. At the University of Kentucky.
Yes, it is the independent student newspaper of the University of Kentucky. It is run and operated entirely by students.
Awesome. And you're the sports editor, so had to have you on. We are a sports podcast, of course. Kentucky football last year had a really good season with Will Levis. Of course, he did end up going to your rival Titans, your cross-state rivals with the Titans. Obviously, had a little bit of a hole there to fill. This season kind of showed that. Started off the season 5-0, but ended up losing 5 of its last 7, and of course, ending in that 7-6 season. Second straight 7-6 season without a bowl game win, and it's the 4th overall 7-6 without a bowl game win under Mark Stoops, if I have that correct. That's a stat that I saw online. What was it what was the overall expectations of the fan base going into this year, knowing that Will Levis was leaving, of course, and was it a successful season, given the fact that they had that huge hole at the quarterback position, or were fans expecting a little bit more given the taste of success that they had the year prior?
Yeah, so I would definitely say this season left a lot to be desired, to say the least. Myself included, we do our editors' picks every single year going into the season, and all 3 editors projected Kentucky to lose 3 games this year. And that's not quite what happened, as you went over. So, losing Will Levis was huge, understandably so. Will Levis was a lifeline for Kentucky fans. No disrespect to any quarterback before him, but it felt like a long time since a quarterback could really sling the ball the way he could. And year one, you combine that with Wan'Dale Robinson, who's been doing great stuff in the NFL as well, and you had a lethal combination. So you come back, you have, at the time, a lot of people were really high on Devin Leary, another big transfer quarterback. You have Liam Cohen coming back as offensive coordinator, who helped make Levis so great in that first year. A lot of people were really willing to believe that down year in Levis's second year might have been to blame on the offensive coordinator, Rich Scangarello. And then you got a lot of good pieces. Ray Davis coming in. Ray Davis did live up to the hype for the most part. I mean, he was arguably one of the best running backs to ever come through Kentucky in one season. So you had Ray Davis coming in, you had, the wide receiver group coming back, you had Barryon, Dane, Tavion. I mean, all those guys were expected to make some big strides. So, the expectations are very, very high. The expectations were to get back to that 10-win season that they'd accomplished just 1 year prior. And, you start off the season with your expected wins, your FCS opponent, your MAC schools, the schools that Kentucky should be beating, right? I think they beat Akron, Ball State, Eastern Kentucky, and then they go on the road, beat let's call a duck, a not very good Vanderbilt squad. So you start off a pretty easy schedule on the road. You beat Vanderbilt, and then you come home and you beat Florida. And that's a big game, but in retrospect, it's one that admittedly wasn't as big as it seemed at the time. That's college football, though. There's a lot of teams that, lest we forget, Colorado was ranked in the top 25 at one point. So college football is constantly changing, and at the time, Florida seemed like a big opponent, and it seemed big. So, maybe there was some inflation in where people thought Kentucky would be, and then you had the absolute destruction at Georgia. Then you had the just collapse against Missouri, and they got a couple more wins in the season. They got a notable one in Starkville against, admittedly, a not very good Mississippi State team who was reeling off the loss of their head coach. But I think, quite frankly, Kentucky just wasn't all that good this year, and it's what hurt that more is that you did have that great start, like you mentioned. You had an easy front to the season that you were able to kind of inflate your win total, and then it all came crashing down.
For Kentucky, though, what you can say about Kentucky is their losses were not that bad, though. I mean, Georgia, obviously not a bad loss. Missouri was not a bad loss. I mean, they ended the season on top too, and then Tennessee as well was definitely not a bad team by any means. And then, of course, you lost to Alabama was another loss, and South Carolina. So the teams you did lose to were not bad teams by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, top 5 teams, some of them really even, and it was just unfortunately, the schedule, that's how it ended up this year. And, it was a hard, hard couple matchups. And that's how it is when you're in the SEC. It just, the matchups are not going to be easy, and you have to really battle to, get those top rated bowl games. Let me ask you, though, about Ray Davis. You mentioned Ray Davis might be one of the best running backs to come through Kentucky. I think he might actually be the best running back to come through Kentucky. And I'd like to get your thoughts on that, and what the fan base thinks of that as well. I mean, finished with 21 touchdowns, 14 rushing, and 7 receiving, of course. So that's, I think that the program's record, right, in one season was 21 touchdowns for a running back, if I'm not mistaken. So I think
Yes, he broke
Ray
the record.
Davis actually was one of the best running backs in the league, or in the program history at least.
Yeah, no, I would agree. If you want my personal opinion, I would say he's the best. I'm a big Ray Davis guy. I've got the special privilege, as a part of the media. I've talked to Ray Davis. I've talked to running backs in the past that have come through Kentucky. Ray Davis is a fantastic guy. Super, super humble. I remember after the Florida game, it was probably one of the best games Kentucky's seen out of a running back. He was so close to breaking the single game record, I think. And he didn't take a single ounce of credit. It was all, that's my O-line. They gave me blocks. The team played great today. Even when you look at it, the team as a whole didn't play that great against Florida. Ray Davis did, but he was the first one to sing his team's praises and not take any credit for himself. He's got a tremendous story. It's been well documented, the struggles he had in his upbringing, and I think he's a fantastic individual, and what he did on the field speaks for itself. I would personally say Ray Davis is the best running back to come through Kentucky, but I usually say one of, because Kentucky's had a lot of really great running backs the last few years. I mean, you had the Benny Snell years.
Yeah, they have.
You had Chris Rodriguez. You had a lot of guys who came through that were really, really big guys and really, really big names. So I say one of, just to kind of be respectful, give credit where it's due to a lot of other running backs. But if you want my personal opinion, I think Ray Davis has to be number one. I think he's a fantastic individual off the field and on the field. I mean, man, what a monster. I mean, other teams could know exactly what he's going to do and could not stop it. It was impressive to watch.
Accounted for 68% of Kentucky's rushing yards this year, just under just over 1,100 at 1,129. How concerned are we, though, about this QB battle that's going to be happening next year? I mean, you already kind of alluded to it. They signed Lexington Christian Academy, I think is what it's called. Cutter Boyley, am I saying that correctly?
Cutter Boley.
They have him. Yeah, they Cutter Boyley. Van Graff from Georgia, he's coming in. Obviously was the backup under Carson Beck for a long time as well. And Brew Allen as well from Georgia Southern. So you have a three-way quarterback controversy going on in the offseason, heading into training camp here. How concerned are we from the fan base, about this, three-way battle for quarterback and really not having that established guy going into the next season?
If you want to be honest with you, I don't think there's all that much concern. Obviously, it's going to come down to training camp and how everyone does. But if you're looking at it right now, I would expect Brock to be the starter come fall. And I think most people are. He's a former 5-star guy. He's coming from Georgia. I mean, a guy like that, he transfers to Kentucky for a reason, right? And I think a lot of people are really excited for what he could bring to the table and excited for what he could do. I think that Bo Allen will be the backup, which I think is a good thing. When he left Kentucky, he wasn't where he needed to be, but he went and got some experience. I think it was at Tarleton State in the FCS level. And more importantly, what that did, I think, is it gave him confidence. He didn't have a ton of time to really play here at Kentucky. So he got some reps, and he was going to be at Georgia Southern for a year, but I believe he had to sit out because it was a second transfer. So he never really played there. And when the opportunity opened up, you had the whole room pretty much. You had Destin Wade, Deuce Hogan, Kaya Sharon all leaving the Kentucky program. You needed a backup. And, Bowen's a guy who's from here. I think he's from Somerset. So it's easier to be a backup at home where you're comfortable and can at least try to compete for the starting role than it is to, be somewhere like Georgia Southern. I mean, I think that not that he's not going to compete. I think he will, absolutely. But I think that if he were to get the backup role that I expect he will, he's going to be fine with that because, perhaps that's what he's comfortable with at this point. And he shined at Tarleton State. I thought he did some really good things there. So he's definitely not the Bo Allen that left Kentucky. He's a very competent and capable quarterback. So I think, no disrespect to the guy. I hope he does well. But you saw when Will Levis went down and even Devin Leary a few times, Kaya Sharon just, to me, didn't feel like an SEC starter. He really wasn't at that level yet. So it'll be nice, Obviously, you hope nothing happens to Brock, but if you need to throw in a backup for a little bit, a guy like Bo Allen that's proven that he can do it, that has had some meaningful reps, that has led a team, it's big. As for Cutter Boley, I think your concern should not be getting him game ready this season. I mean, it's been a criticism of Kentucky really for these last few years and how much they've relied on the transfer portal, but you need to prove that you can develop a quarterback. And Cutter Boley to me strikes me as, if you play your cards right, he's going to be a fantastic starter in a few years. You know what I mean? He's a guy you want to develop to be that guy, but maybe you're not trying to throw him into the fire right away. So get him in there, let him get behind a 5-star guy, let him get behind someone who started and played meaningful reps, and let him get that confidence and let him develop. And then you can kind of let him be your guy going forward. But I don't expect him to really be meaningfully in that quarterback battle necessarily this year. I think this is a big development year for him. And Kentucky needs, if you want my opinion, they need to develop that quarterback because it's been a big criticism. And it's one I have personally levied in some stories for. When you look at, a lot of people are very, very glad Mark Stoops is coming back to this program. But there's still problems that exist in the program that you need to try to fix if you want to get to that next level, especially with the playoffs expanding and opportunities for, postseason football becoming bigger. You want to be a school that can actually develop quarterbacks. So I'm hoping they take that job, very seriously, and they can develop him to be a really great player in a few years.
Cutter Boley, of course, just coming out of high school too, so that's a lot for him to be thrown into an SEC school, SEC juggernaut. That is, you saw the schedule that you always have every single year, and especially this year you struggled against it. So might be a hard ask for him. And then of course, Boy Allen, like you said, he has a little bit of experience that he needs to gain as well, and a little bit more practice and ability that he needs to gain as well before he can get the starting job. But yeah, I mean, Vandergraff, of course, Brock Vandergraff, of course, 5-star recruit from high school, 4-star recruit at Georgia, and then he obviously was the backup for Carson Beck for a long time as well, with tremendous coaching. So I think a lot of people think as well in the media that he will get the starting job as the quarterback. But hey, we'll see. Maybe something happens. Boley or Boy Allen, maybe they turn some heads and something happens here in training camp. What is the expectations, though, going into the season? You mentioned the 12-team playoff, of course, this year, going from 4 to 12. Is there any chances that the fan base has any expectations on the fan base that Kentucky might be one of these 12 teams next year?
Oh man, that's a tough one. Because you got to really pose the question: could Kentucky be? Sure, they have the schedule to do it. You have a gauntlet in the SEC, and lest anyone forget, that's an SEC that's adding Oklahoma and Texas next year. Kentucky travels to Austin next season; they'll play at Texas. So the opportunities for big wins are there for sure. That if they are able to kind of exceed expectations, they could make the playoffs. They have definitely the wins to do it, and the wins to be a very high seed if they can do it. But I think on that same vein, on that same branch, you have a lot of really, really tough opponents. And, I like the way the schedule is laid out. It's laid out to be more kinder to Kentucky. They've got some easier games kind of thrown in the middle instead of just all at the beginning and then kind of fed to the gauntlet. That's kind of been another problem with Kentucky is letting those losses spiral. So I really like having some of those easier games kind of thrown in the middle of the schedule and even towards the end so you can kind of rebound and bounce back. So that's always good to look forward to. But it's going to be a tough schedule, man. It looks brutal. So I would say the expectation, I mean, I can't speak for everybody. There's certainly people who are all on that I want playoffs. But I just think you look at last year, and certainly all the losses, maybe except South Carolina, were understandable. I mean, at the time, you didn't really know what Missouri was going to be. They were kind of undervalued at that time, but they went on to be great. But you look at that Georgia game, you look at the Alabama game, I mean, you're going to Texas, you got Georgia. You just need to be competitive in those games. Even if you lose those games, you need to show that you belong in those games. And going down to Athens, Georgia, playing Alabama here, Kentucky got ran off the field in both games, quite frankly. I mean, Alabama was up 21-0 halfway through the first quarter, and Georgia put 51 on their head. So I don't want to say that you should accept losing by any stretch of the imagination, but the goal, I think, for this year with such a tough schedule and so many incoming transfers is to show that Kentucky belongs in the conversation to be a big-time SEC team again. I mean, obviously Tennessee's kind of been coming back after having some down years in their program. Florida's a little bit down right now, but during the 10-win season, it was like Kentucky was playing Georgia for a chance at the East. Last year, it didn't really feel like Kentucky had any shot at the East whatsoever. So you want to be back in that conversation for, can we be at the level people are including us in those title conversations? Can we be at the level that, we're consistently in the AP poll? I mean, you want to be a legit team because that helps you in recruiting, that helps you in the transfer portal, and especially, if you're able to be competitive in those games, that helps you a lot with developing the players you already have, getting them confidence, because football, more than perhaps any other sport, is a game of, you want to be good every year, but you're also preparing every single game for next year and the year after that and developing the players you got. So I really think it's just about being in the conversation more than it is about actually making the playoffs. I think it's about being seen on a level that you actually talked about in that bubble. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, it's going to take, we always say on this show, success begets more success, right? You have a good season here, better season the next year, then even a better season that third year. Recruits start to come in, get some more money, get some more momentum under your belt, and then maybe like 4 years from now, you could be one of those 12 teams, because that's the thing about being in the SEC. We saw this year with the ACC. Even if you go undefeated in the ACC like Florida State did, you still might not make the playoffs. But that's the thing with the SEC, is if you can have a good record in the SEC, you're going to make the playoffs, and especially if it's going to be a 12-team playoff. So that's something for Kentucky fans to really hang their hat on. If they can really improve some things, get some better recruits, more money in, maybe in like 2-3 years, I mean, they really might be one of those 12 teams now that it has been expanded, because, just being in the SEC alone, I think with that 12-team playoff expansion, I think a 2-loss team absolutely has a chance to make the playoffs, if not even a third loss team, especially if they were competitive in those 3 losses. So, like you said, a lot of things to look forward to for Kentucky football fans, and we'll see what they can do in the next 2-3 years. Get that quarterback situation figured out as well, and they'll be flying high for sure. Basketball, Kentucky basketball, relevant right now, of course, that sport that is in season, and not only that, the team for Kentucky that's going to go very far this year, I think. Currently number 6 in the AP rankings. Let me ask you this, man, real fast, Cole. Best offense we've seen in a decade for Kentucky? It sure seems like it. I mean, they have, over 3 players shooting from above 40% from beyond the 3, and I think like 5 players are scoring in double digits. I mean, it's one of the best offenses that we've seen in a long time for Kentucky.
Yeah, I mean, without a doubt. When you look at Kentucky, there's always tough competition for best, but for me, one of the most fun, I think, ever at Kentucky, quite frankly. I've thoroughly enjoyed watching this team, and it's so crazy how, growing up around this area, it feels like Kentucky is Kentucky again in that way. And, you've got a lot of guys who do a lot of really great things well. You've got DJ Wagner, who I think was a little bit undervalued by some fans a little bit early on. He goes down, they lose the Wilmington game, and it's like, wow, DJ Wagner adds a lot to our team, actually. They need him. Justin Edwards, he's a guy who, again, hasn't necessarily shined the way some people expected him to, but he's a really big piece for that team. Coming off the bench, I mean, Reed Shepherd, what more can you say about Reed Shepherd? He's insane. A guy they expected to be a real big fundamentals guy, maybe not the best shooter, and he's shooting the lights out. He's insanely reliable, unwaveringly reliable even. And you got Rob Dillingham, perhaps a guy who's coming in here and playing like he's already in the NBA. He's that good. And certainly he makes mistakes. Certainly he has some of those things, but he plays an NBA style of basketball. He plays like a pro, and he's so fun to watch. Now you got the bigs back. I mean, Ugana's done some great things, and Aaron Bradshaw, even when he struggled a little bit at Florida, he had that massive block, had the three-pointer that ended up winning the game, really. And then you got guys coming off the bench like Adu Thiero, does a lot of that fundamental stuff. One of the best rebounders on the team. Antonio Reeves has been so reliable that you don't even talk about him half the time because he's just consistently dropping 20+. Trey Mitchell, who's been perhaps the lifeblood of the entire team, all of these guys, I mean, I just named over a full starting lineup worth of guys, and that's not even mentioning everyone else. Like, this is an insane roster that Kentucky's got this year, and I think that it really does have the chance to go really, really far.
Yeah, the last Wildcat team to have three shooters shooting above 40% from the three was back in 97, 98 season. Then I also mentioned, the amount of players that you have that you just mentioned as well, Cool, just shooting lights out and, scoring in really fun ways as well. If you would round up Justin Edwards 9.5 points per game, this will be out on Thursday, but we're recording this on Monday. If you would round up Justin Edwards 9.5 points per game, that would be 6 Kentucky players shooting in double digits. The last time the team had 6 double-digit scores on average was the 2011-2012 season, where they did end up going on to win the national championship. So, talk more about the defense, because the offense, of course, is not a problem for Kentucky. That's rolling. That's unstoppable right now. But how are they on the defensive side of the ball? Are they able to really slow teams down? And do you think it's going to be a defense that can hold up once March comes around and the tournament gets underway?
I do. I think that it's difficult to talk in full about Kentucky's defense because you have such a massive divide where you start the season with no 7-footers, and now you've got 2, hopefully going to be 3 soon, regarding the Big Z situation. But the team has certainly changed on the defensive side of the ball with that. I mean, you saw it was obviously most people were talking about the three-pointer hit by Bradshaw to win the game, but arguably just as important was the massive block he had right before that. Adu Thiero is another guy who's been out the last few games with some back injuries, but he's been getting a decent amount of blocks. Ugana Onyenso is another big guy you throw out there. As for slowing teams down, I think it's honestly somewhat the opposite. I think that Kentucky plays such a fast-paced style of ball and can score so well that they're more willing to speed other teams up, force them into some more bad decision-making, force them into, so what if they get a possession, we'll go down and score on the next one anyway, You kind of saw that a few times. I mean, they let Marshall score a whole lot of points. I think you look at Marshall scoring that many points and you're like, what was Kentucky doing? Well, they were scoring 116 points themselves. I mean, that's an NBA number. Like, let's be honest with ourselves. So I think that, you could say they could do a little bit better at slowing other teams down, but I think that they play in a way that they're willing to speed other teams up and play their faster brand of basketball and score so much that they're solid on the defense, man. I don't want to discredit that. I think that they're better on defense than people give them credit for. I mean, especially a guy like Reed and your big guys down low. And Trey Mitchell does a lot of really great things as well. And they just have, man, that offense is just so good that you're able to kind of, like, no matter what they do, it's like a battle of attrition. You know what I mean? And Kentucky just has more firepower than everyone else does. You talked about you rounding up. You got 6 guys scoring double figures. That's more than a starting lineup's worth of players that are scoring in double digits every single game. So most teams just simply don't have that kind of depth to back it up. And even the best of the best. I mean, Kentucky had no 7-footers and narrowly lost to Kansas on a neutral court. So they got the win over North Carolina. They've got a win at Florida now. Obviously, you said this is going to come out on Thursday, so we won't know the result of the Missouri game. But they've played good teams. They've played teams that can score. They've played good defensive teams. And no matter what happens, I mean, they just find ways to win. And I'm not going to say anything about the Wilmington game. There was a lot of things you can point to. It was a bad game. It happens. But for the most part, when they play good teams, they find ways to win. And I think that's really, really important.
What was different between this year and last year? I mean, last year, for Kentucky standards, not the best year. But like I said, man, like we just talked about it at length for the last 10 minutes, they're playing lights out this year. I mean, offense was not nearly where it was last year. They shot back this year, like I said, playing absolutely lights out. Defense, stopping teams as well. Really, truly looking like a top 5 team in the country. And I know they're number 6 right now, but definitely in a week or two, I would definitely could see them being a top 5 team in the country. And then what has changed? I mean, really, what has been the biggest difference between this year and last year? Having this team bounce back.
If you want me to, I think first, if we're just getting the elephant out of the room, this team has more talent, quite frankly. That's no disrespect to anybody who was on last year's team, but this year's, this recruiting class was talked about so much because in the era of college basketball with so much transfer portal players and veteran players and 5th or 6th year guys, this is a team primarily made up of freshmen, and it was still so highly touted because it's got so many guys. But I think a big factor that's played a really, really important role is chemistry. I mean, I don't want to speak too much to last year's team and kind of discredit anything they did or kind of, go too much about everything going on in that program. But I think you just watch the way this team plays this year, and you can just tell they love playing basketball with each other. I mean, you can look at the assists they get every game, and that was one of the things. The Wilmington game they lost, their assist numbers were the lowest they've been all season, I want to say, or they were at least pretty low. So they share the ball. They're very unselfish. There was a play that ended up not working out in Florida. They didn't get the basket, but a player was driving, had a semi-decent look at a layup, and he saw someone wide open on three-point line, and he made the pass. Sure, he could have got that 2 points, but he was like, hey, if we hit that three-pointer, that's big for momentum, that's big. He's wide open. I'm going to give him the ball. And I think it's that mentality. These guys aren't just bought in to play basketball. They're bought in to play basketball as a team, and I think that's really, really important. You talk about it all the time, when they come out for interviews, the players are joking with each other. We were doing post-game interviews after Florida. It was Reed Shepherd and Aaron Bradshaw, and someone was asking Reed about something about Bradshaw, and he looks over, smiles a little bit, and then really loudly says Bradshaw's name and starts talking good about him. And Bradshaw looks over, smiles, and goes, "Oh yeah, that Reed Shepherd guy." They're joking with each other while doing interviews with the media. I think that this team is so special because they get it. You know what I mean? They have that team cohesion. They're so bought in to play at Kentucky. And it's been a criticism of John Calipari these last few years that he only cares about getting guys to the NBA. He only cares about, he doesn't care about Kentucky as much. But these guys, obviously, they want to get to the NBA. Obviously, they're going to go to the NBA, probably after 1 year. But while they're here, they're bought in to play Kentucky basketball. They love the fans. They're signing autographs. They're engaging with people all the time. They're playing for each other. They're joking. They're playing with that chemistry and energy that I haven't seen in years at Kentucky.
You mentioned the assists. Kentucky ranks top 15 in the nation. In 5 different offensive categories, and assist is one of those categories. Of course, probably even top 5 in assists. I don't actually know the exact number offhand, but you mentioned Calipari. I know, crazy to think he was on the hot seat last year. I know I mentioned earlier in our talk that Kentucky definitely didn't have the best season last year, and it's crazy to think, looking back on it, especially with how Kentucky's playing now, that he was on the hot seat last year. What do you think about, and what is your thoughts, your takes on the narrative around Calipari, that really all he cares about is getting people to the NBA? I know a lot of people have said that. That's a very national media rhetoric that's going around. I know people probably within Kentucky, within Lexington, are not really saying that. But what do you say to that rhetoric about Calipari? Really one of his biggest goals is to get kids to the NBA and not really so much winning those national titles.
I think it's taken a little bit out of context. And I don't think that the actuality situation is bad at all. Calipari is very vocal about the fact that he tries to get guys to the NBA. There's been times players were thinking about coming back to college, and he told them, no, you should go to the pros. And some people take issue with that. Personally, I respect that. I really do. I think a lot. I was never good enough to play in college, but I played sports in high school, and I think it's really easy sometimes for people to forget that when you're looking at these players, these are people. And especially, I'm in college, so it feels weird saying this, but for Calipari's perspective, these are kids. These are kids with dreams and futures, and they don't always know what's best for them necessarily. So I absolutely respect that, he sets these kids up. We just talked with one of the assistants today in a post game, and he said he's worked in the NBA before, and he's like, Kentucky probably so much more than other schools. Kentucky trains and practices and prepares itself like a pro team. You know what I mean? Like the environment, like these guys are working towards being professionals. They teach you how to get to those goals. They teach you, not just playing good basketball. They teach you, eating right, getting in the gym, working out, like building a life around basketball. And I think that I respect that a lot because one, not only does that make it huge for getting kids into Kentucky, whose goal is to get to the, let's not kid ourselves. When we talk about these top kids, these top college recruits, their goal is to get to the NBA. They might want to win a national championship to get there, but that's the number one goal is to go pro. For some of these guys, their number one goal is to go pro and support their families on the money they're going to make, something like that. So I respect that he has that, but I don't think that it's so far that he doesn't care about winning the national championship. I think that's a bit hyperbolic, and I understand it. Fans can overreact to things sometimes. I've overreacted to a ton of things in my sports fandom and my sports life. There's been times where my team's lost a game they should, and I'm like, well, we'll never win again. It's over. Just fold the team. So I get it. Fans, sometimes it's tough to, see the bigger picture at all times, especially when things aren't going well in the moment. But I respect that Calipari is the way he is, and I think that if he wasn't that way, Kentucky would not get some of the recruits it does. Just simple as that. I think it's a big selling point for recruits, and it makes them want to come here. I think that certainly there's fair amount of criticism that's levied at Cal. I levied criticism at Cal. I wrote a column about whether or not last year was the breaking point. Should he have? When you look at Kentucky, he's only won one national title in so many years, and it feels kind of funny to say only one national title because most coaches don't ever get one. But it's Kentucky basketball. You have to understand the brand. There was the 9-16 season, which I think he was helped a little bit by the fact that Duke and North Carolina also struggled that year. But it was a bad year, a very bad year. And then you had the St. Peter's loss. You had even last year, beating Providence and then losing close to Kansas State in the second round. It just wasn't what Kentucky basketball should be. But it was a big point that he made this year. I forget which game it was after, but he had a quote that I really, really liked. I quoted it on Twitter, I think, but sorry, X, formerly known as Twitter. But he said, there was all this talk about why don't you play this way? Why don't you play that way? How about I play with the team I have? And I think that this team that he's created, this mixture of these veteran leader guys like Trey Mitchell and Antonio Reeves, who Kentucky was really lucky to get, both of those guys, especially Trey Mitchell, because there was some circumstances within West Virginia's program that led to Mitchell's decision to transfer that if that hadn't happened, he wouldn't be at Kentucky right now, simply put. And I think he's built a lot of really great things with these recruits. You have the in-state guy like Reed. You have these big-time names from across the country. Both went to the same high school, Aaron Bradshaw and DJ Wagner, Justin Edwards from that same area. This is a Cal team that is everything he looks for, and he's playing with the team he has. He feels more comfortable than he has in his last few years, and I think that says a lot. This is a team that he created to play his brand of basketball, which a lot of people don't like to hear this, I guess, but a lot of the best coaches, their brand of basketball is whatever players they have. You can't fit a round peg into a square hole. You have to kind of adapt every single year to the players you got. Sometimes you can play a certain way, sometimes you can't. If Oscar Tshiebwe was on this team right now, they'd be playing differently. They just would. They were slower these last 2 years because the offense was built around Tshiebwe. Now, even with 7-footers and Trey Mitchell, the offense is faster. They got these guys that they're built around speed. So I think, this team is just more catered to his strengths more so.
So it sounds like you were one of those guys, though, that was maybe questioning whether Calipari might have lost his step last year, based on the article you wrote. And were you just voicing the sentiment of the fan base, or was it really ever? Did people ever actually think Calipari was going to leave last year? Let me just ask it that way. Was it more of a rhetoric, or was it actually a thing that a lot of people thought was very possible at the end of last season?
I certainly think it was possible, especially when you look at a circumstance like he was linked to the Texas job for a little bit, right? That was one of the big storylines is Cal going to go to Texas and whatnot, and he ended up not. But Texas itself had a storyline not that long ago. Little-known guy called Shaka Smart, has led Marquette to be a big-time program. He wasn't fired from Texas by any means. He was on the hot seat. He was struggling. They had a bad loss to, I think it was Abilene Christian. But he chose to go to Marquette in the offseason because, simply put, the seat was hot. He was struggling. He wanted a change of scenery. And Kentucky fans, and understandably so, you're probably the biggest brand in college basketball. The first program to reach 2,000 wins, the second most national titles outside of UCLA, who did most of theirs within the same decade. Now, with Kansas's IARP violations, the winningest program of all time, the standard is ridiculous, but it should be, arguably. You know what I mean? It's kind of like Alabama in football. If you were to be solid but have no postseason, then you start wondering, Even this year when they lost to Texas, there's people wondering, has Saban lost a little bit? And that feels absurd. They made the playoffs, but that's just not the standard the program's at anymore. And Kentucky is not at that standard. I mean, you went 9-16. Obviously, he was hurt by COVID canceling the tournament, right? That was something that he couldn't have possibly helped. But after COVID, so that's 1 year. After COVID, you go 9-16, you don't make the tournament. That's 2 seasons. Then you go the next year, you're good. You have a 2 seed. You even blow out the eventual national champions in the regular season. Then you lose to St. Peter's. That's 3 straight years where fans did not see a single tournament win. One of those was completely out of your control. I get it. One of those was a crazy upset. They happen. I get it. But the fact of the matter was, it's been 3 years since Kentucky fans have seen a win. And even last year, when they finally got that postseason win, it felt iffy. This was a team that came back all the players from a 2 seed almost, and they get a 6 seed, narrowly win their first round game, and then lose the second round game. So there was certainly a lot of questions of the problem is not necessarily you don't want to be lenient. The problem is how much do we allow this before this becomes the new standard? And you don't want that to become the new standard when you're in a program like Kentucky. You never want to accept that mediocrity. So I think there was certainly people that I don't think anybody thought he was actually going to be fired like after that season by any stretch of the imagination. I don't think there was anybody that expected really and truly that last season was going to be the last year. But there was talks that, are we getting to that point where it needs to be a real conversation? And I think most people were like, yes. There were obviously people who were like, he should be gone now, but that's sports. If you're a sports fan, you understand that's sports. But I think that most people were generally at that level of it needs to be brought up. It needs to be discussed. It's uncomfortable. It's an ugly, wrinkly elephant in the corner of the room, but it's got to be mentioned. And this year, I mean, I was that way. I think a lot of people were that way. But when this year started and you see what this year's become, it's okay. We might have overreacted a little bit, but it's the same way I see the Mark Stoops situation on the football side. I mean, after the South Carolina loss, obviously you had the whole thing going on with Texas A&M, and most people are glad he's coming back. But it's still important that just because you're glad something's going well, you don't forget that there are still problems. There are still things that were unacceptable, and that stretch for Kentucky was unacceptable. It's great that he's rebounded. I hope, for his sake and for Kentucky's sake that they can have a really great season. I hope that, selfishly, I hope that I get to cover a Final Four. I think that'd be awesome to be able to fly out there to Arizona and cover that game. That'd be absolutely amazing. It'd be a dream come true. Since growing up, I've always wanted to be at a Final Four. But if he did, then it would be great that they rebounded. It would be, we were being hasty, but it was a conversation that needed to be had because things were not going very well. And at Kentucky, things can only not go well for so long before you start to say, hey, we're the best program in college basketball.
I was going to say, it wouldn't have lasted long if this year would have been bad as well. I mean, things would have gotten very interesting very fast because Kentucky, your expectations, like you were saying, Cole, are so high and that's why things got bad so fast, even with him struggling for really only 1 year. It was really, I mean, even the year before that, he was fine. Kentucky was fine. It was just one bad year, and people already, pounding on the panic alarm and talking about firing and getting rid of him and all that. And I thought it was crazy at the time as somebody from the outside looking in. I thought it was kind of crazy, the whole rhetoric about firing Calipari, and I'm glad that he didn't, and I'm sure the whole Kentucky fan base is also glad that they did not because, again, Kentucky, number 6 in the league, or number 6 in the nation right now, probably really a top 5 team. Well, cool. This has been really fun, man.
I will say, go ahead. If you don't mind, I will say real quick, though, to that point, I agree, and I'm not at all trying to compare John Calipari to this guy necessarily, but Billy Gillispie got 2 years in Kentucky before he was gone. Certainly that Kentucky, when things are not going well, the leash is significantly shorter than it is in other places because of that history. So I don't think it's kind of the same way as maybe a little bit different, but, Indiana having their talks right now with their coach. It is hasty. It feels hasty, but you like I kind of mentioned, you have to worry about the standard of the program and not letting it get so far. So I think Kentucky, the precedent was there that 1 or 2 bad years could do it in for you, especially if those were your first 2 years like it was for Gillespie. But certainly I think that I'm with you that I think they made the right choice into not doing anything. And I think that Calipari's got his swagger back a little bit, that this Kentucky team is one that has the real potential to go all the way. And it's been a joy to watch.
It makes the job unattractable. I mean, it makes the job very unattractive because you come in there, like you said, Cole. If you have 1 or 2 years where you kind of slide a little bit, you're going to have a lot of mad eyes on you and a lot of panic buttons being smashed. So a lot of stress that many coaches might not want to deal with. But my last question, man, this has been really fun. Like I said, definitely we'll be in touch. Have you on again, maybe in the future as well. We mentioned Calipari, kids that he coaches going to the NBA. And you mentioned freshman Reed, Reed Shepard, the freshman earlier, playing absolutely amazing. Leads the country right now in true shooting percentage. I think he's the second Kentucky guard to ever do that, to ever lead the country in true shooting percentage. So he's playing absolutely amazing. My last question for you, man, before we head out here, what's the chances of him being a one and done, going pro next year? Do you think it's pretty much a locked in, or has there been any rumblings about him maybe staying in Lexington after this year's done?
Oh man, I mean, there's still so many games left to be played that it's hard to say for sure. But if he keeps up this level of play, he would be insane not to go. I know he loves Kentucky. I know Kentucky loves him. But if he's playing at this level, he's a lottery pick, like a big time pick. The boards are high on him. He's playing such a high level of basketball on both sides of the ball, defense and offense. He's scoring so well. I mean, if he keeps up this level of play, especially if Kentucky makes a deep run in March, especially if Kentucky even brings home some silverware, either in the conference or in the national conversation, he's got to be gone. You think he's got to be? I mean, at that level, being that high of a pick, that high of a talent, Kentucky's got money for sure. People want to talk about NIL figures versus contract, but he's going to be a top 10 pick in the NBA if he keeps up this level of play. He'd be crazy
Oh
not to
yeah.
go.
Yeah, I know. I don't know what the actual draft board is right now. I mean, it's still way too early, obviously, as well. We're not even halfway through this season,
Yeah,
but yeah,
absolutely.
we'll see what happens. Hey, man, like he's really fun to watch, though. Like I said, I've seen him play a couple times now, and like you said earlier, he's probably one of the most fun players to watch, regardless of what team he's on. And I want to see him continue to do well, to see what he can do down the stretch, and hopefully lead Kentucky to greener pastures once March comes in. March comes here. Well, man, it's been really fun. Like I said, I'll be in touch. Love to have you on, and we'll have to have you on again in the future. Maybe Kentucky, hopefully they can go far. Like I said, deep into March, and we can have you back on, talk about their playoffs, how they've been so far, and just overall the season from last time we talked today.
Yeah, definitely. I look forward to it. Hopefully, selfishly, again, hopefully I will be covering a deep run in March, and hopefully I'll
I
be
hope you will
maybe even
too.
on scenes.
I would be jealous. I would be jealous. That's for sure. Well, man, this has been awesome. Like I said, I'll be in touch, and we'll have you on again shortly, and we'll talk soon. Okay. Okay, let's finish up the show. Quick outro here, Justin. Most intriguing storyline, and then we'll be on our way. What's your most intriguing storyline of the last couple days?
Most intriguing storyline is obviously going to be for me the Pat McAfee and Aaron Rodgers situation at ESPN, Disney, and ABC. Aaron Rodgers obviously going after Jimmy Kimmel based on the Epstein allegations, obviously being affiliated with him. But this is a big situation here for Rodgers as he will not be able to go on the Pat McAfee show they announced just yesterday. So it's a weird
Yeah.
situation. It's intriguing, but I think there's a lot of blame to go around for this on all sides, even
Yeah. No, it's
because Aaron
yeah.
Rodgers obviously was a big guest on the Pat McAfee show. He's gone on Pat McAfee before, even before he was on ESPN.
Oh
But
yeah.
for
Mm-hmm.
Rodgers, they at least could have worked out some way. But stuff gets involved with at that level.
No, for sure. No, they yeah, they had to do something. I mean, he was coming on, and he was literally, um, you know, talking smack about ESPN, literally on ESPN. So
Mm-hmm.
they had to do something. I'm actually surprised he was on. I'm surprised they even let him back on this past Tuesday after he came on the following Tuesday. I'm surprised he even came on this week, just giving how tumultuous and the situation that he put ESPN in. I'm surprised they even allowed him back to come on this week. But yeah, I guess they wanted to give him a chance to apologize, speak his truth, but him coming on this last Tuesday was the final straw for ESPN, and just a weird situation overall. I mean, a very, very weird situation. And yeah, they're just going to put it behind them and I guess act like it never happened at ESPN. Pat McAfee is, of course, definitely feuding right now with the upper management. He's not happy with them at all. And, they're not happy with him. And it's just a very, very shady situation for sure, all things considered. My most intriguing storyline, the refs. Do refs favor the Lakers? Do they give them special treatment? Raptors, of course, they played the Lakers on Tuesday night. This last Tuesday night, fell to the Raptors. The Raptors fell to the Lakers, 132 to 131. It was the free throw parity though in the fourth quarter that really got all the attention. The Lakers shot 23 free throws in that fourth quarter, while the Raptors went to the line only twice. Of course, this ended up helping the Lakers get the victory over the Raptors. Anthony Davis himself scored 20 of his 41 points in the fourth quarter, while going 11 for 11 at the time. At the line in the final period, he shot 14 to the Lakers, 36 free throws in the game. The entire Toronto roster shot only 13 in the entire game. So just absolutely crazy. Darko Rajkovic, head coach of the Raptors, absolutely just went on a tangent after the game about the reffing. Just absolutely just beyond upset, beyond mad. And he has a right to be. And because that free throw disparity was beyond incomprehensible. And that ended up losing them the game, and he has all rights to be mad. So yeah, that's my most intriguing storyline. NFL, of course, all the eyes are on the NFL refs, but maybe look for the eyes that start being on NBA refs, because there's definitely been some reports of reffing in the NBA going away this year as well, and we'll see if with more eyes on the refs, if more stories start to come out with bad calls and they find themselves on the hot seat a little bit here, like the refs in the NFL have found themselves in. All right, Justin, good show. Be back on Tuesday, or excuse me, I'll be back on Saturday. Do it all again. Lance Allen, he's going to come on. Milwaukee's Lance Allen from TMJ News. He's going to come on, talk all things Packers with us, and give us an update on the Bucks as well, how they're doing. And it's going to be an awesome interview with him. Of course, the Packers did make the playoffs, and Jordan Love is playing absolutely amazing. And the Bucks, of course, Giannis and Damian Lillard on a tear. So we'll break it all down with him. Awesome show on Tuesday. But until then, take care and keep on traveling.